Thank you. And since I see a few friends in the audience who promised to heckle, maybe we'll just open this up to questions along the way if you have any questions. That way I can kind of disarm any hecklers, I'm hoping. Please come in and have a seat. So just in case you don't know much about DHX, I'll give you a quick overview. You heard briefly that we're about 10 years old now. In fact, May the 19th is our 10th anniversary. And we've spent the last 10 years, and for me more than that, having founded Decode, building an international kids television business or kids content business that happens to be based in Canada. We now have 4 parts to our company. Our core business was production. We have studios in Vancouver, Toronto, and Halifax, animation studios in Halifax and Vancouver, about 800 people in Vancouver, 250 in Halifax. And then we have a live action studio here in Toronto. We also produced, I think, 4 or 5 series last year in the UK. But the other real core part of our business has been the worldwide and international sales part of our business. And one of the things we've done as we've grown this company over the last 10 years is acquire libraries. We believed early on that the kind of digital transformation would ultimately revalue libraries, and that there was content that did not have a place on linear platforms. There simply wasn't enough shelf space, enough room, as many channels as there are, but that there would be some home for it on-demand platforms. So we've been building that library over many years, both through acquisition of existing libraries and the original content that we create. We also have a couple of years ago, we acquired the Family Channel assets in Canada. So we are broadcasters. Of course, every producer dreams of being a broadcaster, so they don't have to go and pitch and grovel, but somehow we're still pitching, not groveling so much. And then we have a licensing unit, because one of the key parts of the kids business, of course, is that it also often has a strong connection to consumer products. So our licensing group, our brands group, happens to be based out of the UK, and we really do have a significant international footprint with offices throughout North America. But on our licensing businesses, we have offices in London, Paris, Barcelona, Milan, Munich, Amsterdam, Stockholm, Warsaw, recently Athens and Dubai. And we manage consumer products opportunities for a number of different brand owners, not just ourselves. So for example, we manage the Minions across all those territories for Universal Pictures and a number of other brands. But the core part of our business and our key customers have always been broadcasters. And we sell to traditional broadcasters around the world. And in fact, when people ask about us as a production company, I always say, well, we're really we're a sales-focused company that happens to be in the business of making content to feed our sales arm and opportunities. And we have great relationships with traditional broadcasters around the world. But the other part of the business is really the growing SVOD and AVOD business. And we have been one of the leaders in selling content to these new platforms as and when they start up and wherever they happen to arise. And I had a note this morning saying that Amazon just launched a direct video. So this is truly late breaking news. All right, it's a screenshot from my email. But there was some questions today around, well, what are we doing about that? Are we in business with them? And the answer is yes, of course. But the thing that Amazon is now doing is really going to, in some ways, compete with YouTube. And that really brings me to the kind of the next part of our business, which is something we really just unveiled a couple of weeks ago called Wildbrain. And this is a company that we've been incubating in-house since 2012. So, and for me, it's been a kind of an interesting story and an evolution, and some people have heard it. But a number of years ago, we spent time, at least our lawyers spent time, sending cease and desist notices to people who were putting what we call user-generated content up, and we call them friends and fans. not pirates, but there's a lot of pirates there. So we were sending cease and desist notices, and then YouTube's or Google's content claiming system evolved to a point where instead of asking people to take the content down that we own, we started to claim it and monetize it ourselves. And again, I don't know how much you know about that, so I'll just go into it a little bit. If we can demonstrate to YouTube, YouTube doesn't care where the content comes from. If you put a Caillou video up and you say you're the owner, then as they sell ads on that, they will send you the check. If you can demonstrate that you're the legitimate copyright owner of that content, they will instead send you the check because there are ads served. Remember, YouTube is an AVOD platform. So we started to monetize our content on YouTube. That is strictly by claiming. And it actually created some small controversy inside the company because there were people in our brand group who said, well, hang on, we shouldn't be serving ads against Caillou. They're for the youngest kids. But one of the things that, we said on the commercial side was, but somebody else is putting that content up and there are ads being served against anyway. Why don't we just step in the line and collect? So that's what we started to do. We developed an interesting and good relationship with YouTube, and then they launched a series of subscription services. And again, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but there was quite a bit of publicity and promotion around the launch of YouTube subscription services, and so we signed up and had, I think, 3 channels in 10 countries in different languages, and it was a kind of a massive thing to set up. And one of the things that we started to do out of that opportunity was build a massive database, which we call megadata, for our some 12,000 episodes. I think we're now up to 17,000 separate assets in our catalog. And so the first step in this was actually building this megadata, and it really is a metadata database of every title that we own, so that we could use them as reference files when figuring out where our content was around the world on YouTube. So that we signed up for a few of these subscription channels. We loaded a bunch of content up from our database. There were conflicts with existing licensees in some of the territories. Traditional broadcasters didn't necessarily like this. And guess what? The YouTube subscription model didn't exactly work. I think we had 5 subscribers. Well, maybe it wasn't 5, but it wasn't very many. But what it did give us was a really great close relationship with YouTube, and they were interested and impressed in the way that we had constructed our database and understood our library in quite a deep way. So that's 2012. This has grown to a point now where I think we're up to 750 or 800 million views a month of all of our content. We manage content for a number of other companies, including people like Turner, some of their content. And it's been a significant and growing part of our business. But one of the things that it's done is, and this will be, I think, a bit of a theme through what I have to say today, for us, this has been a really interesting step into the world of the way that kids are consuming content now, because YouTube is where they are. They're on YouTube, they're on Netflix. So at this point, yes, some of my slides are better than others. What this shows really is that the kids channels are really some of the most popular channels on YouTube. Kids and music, Justin Bieber being right up here at the top almost. And so one of the things that we've done is really work to manage our various channels. So at this point, almost all of our content is actively managed by our team, which has been partly based in Toronto and partly based in the UK. But the other thing, I'm here to talk about some of the other things around discoverability, and this is, I think, again, there's a number of different things that you've heard about, whether they're recommendation engines, algorithms. There's a whole litany of new terms to go with this notion of discoverability. But again, when it comes down to it, we're still traditional broadcasters and producers of long-form content where the primary market is international broadcasters. So I thought that what I'd do is just shift gears and talk a little bit about what we're doing actually on the content side, irrespective of some of the distribution platforms. And I think this is, for us, one of the things is to be platform agnostic overall, have your content on every possible platform, but understand which platforms are actually paying the way. So I'm going to kind of divide it up into two things. The first, I'm going to talk about a few of our legacy properties, because in a library like ours, we have a bunch of different legacy properties that are very well known. And when it comes to the issue of discoverability, it's much easier to get an audience interested in those. So I will start with Degrassi, which of course is hugely well known. It's been around, I think, almost 32 years. There's over 400 episodes produced. And we acquired the Degrassi company a few years ago from Linda Schuyler and Stephen Stone. Linda is the original creator of the series and is still working with us on the show. And a year after we acquired it, the key US long-term broadcaster called us up and basically canceled the show. In fact, what they said was, we'd like to wrap up the show by doing maybe a couple of specials, and oh, by the way, could you get Drake in it? Which we politely said no, and came back to Toronto and huddled and strategized. And we'd already developed the next series, the next season, as it is the next class. And our next step was actually to take the team to Los Angeles and go and pitch what might be replacement partners for our traditional broadcast partner. And we didn't even go to the traditional broadcast partners. We went to Amazon, Netflix, and Hulu. And each one of them showed a huge amount of interest in the show, and we ultimately made a deal with Netflix. And we're now on our second series with Netflix. And the thing about this show for them that was appealing was a built-in audience, built-in awareness. And I think some of these things are really kind of obvious. But for us, even though it's obvious in retrospect, we had no idea when we were going in pitching. We had a pretty good idea that those new platforms would be the most likely buyers of the content. But we were amazed at how quickly they responded, and that the way that they assessed the property was so different from a traditional broadcaster. In this case, it was all about the data. It was data driven. They wanted, and they had of course, Netflix doesn't share their data with other people, but their research department certainly did a deep dive into this to understand exactly what position this property holds in the minds of audiences. And again, we don't really know how well it's done in its first season on Netflix, but it did well enough for them to order another season. And by the way, we have this on the Family Channel in Canada. And Netflix has it worldwide. And one of the issues, and you never know what you're going to run up against, but because Degrassi is serialized, because we've carved out a window for Family Channel in Canada, one of the issues we ran up against with this was the spoiler alert. Of course, I think, again, one of the great themes of the new platforms like Netflix is that they've really forced drama to, they've made drama better, in my view. And especially when you look at serialized drama that really engages audiences. And it's great if you can find it the first time, but if you get hooked, you watch the whole thing. Everybody knows about binge watching. Well, Degrassi's serialized, and because Netflix doesn't have it worldwide, we have effectively a premiere in Canada. One of their biggest concerns was spoiler alerts on social media if it had aired in Canada first. And at the opposite edge of the age range, the Teletubbies. Yeah. Oh, Doug.
What happened with the social media? How did that end up?
Well, it was a concern before the broadcast. It didn't turn out to be that big a deal, so we hear. But again, it's hard to get real hard evidence of this. It didn't seem to affect the viewing, and what I think the conclusion ultimately was that Degrassi fans would go to watch Degrassi whether they knew it was going to happen or not.
But they put it up all at once so that people could binge watch it.
Correct.
You had it staggered over a schedule.
That's right. And so there's a whole thing about negotiating windows in that case.
So the Canadians would have, if they had chosen, and the other thing is that the Canadians couldn't get access unless they had a VPN buyer.
Correct.
So the Degrassi is at a bit of the center of the Canadians who are angry that Netflix is cracking down on the.
Could be.
Yeah.
Haven't heard that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Oh, well, we've got others. So now I've lost my place, Doug. Really? Thank you. Thank you.
We can take over at any time.
I know. I know. It's good to have friends. So the remaking of the Teletubbies could have gone horribly wrong. It originally aired in 1997, and it had millions of fans around the world. It turns out there are some people who didn't like the Teletubbies at all the first time around, and asked why, with 365 episodes, we would want to make more. Well, there were a number of different reasons. One of them is that the original Teletubbies were done in before HD television. They were actually shot in a farmer's field that was sculpted and landscaped. And they really don't hold up to traditional broadcast. They look okay on a small screen, but not in HD. So we actually went to the BBC and said, we think there's a way of using new technology. And in fact, instead of going to a farmer's field and building, if you can imagine, in England where it rains at least half the time, trying to have these extra large characters outside, impossible production scenario. So what we did is basically use the technology that made Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter possible. Green screen technology. We built basically a model. It's I think it's 4 meters across, but basically we build what is a model of the Teletubbies world, and we shot them all blue screen in the studio. And I don't have a clip here today, but it is absolutely seamless. The show looks great. It's a hit in the UK. It's been doing very well. It will launch in the UK, in the US soon. But the reason I wanted to talk about the Teletubbies is it targets kind of the youngest viewers, and the BBC has a tradition of doing shows that are really at kids' bedtime, 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. And they're probably the only broadcaster in the world that actually has ever made shows that are for kids under 3. And in lots of territories, there are no ratings for kids under 2. And most places, people don't think kids should be watching television before they're 2 or 1. But anybody who has a 2-year-old, I don't, but I've seen 2-year-olds with iPads, and they're way better than I am with an iPad. So kids really are some of the earliest adopters of the technology. And again, for us, that's one of the themes. We are targeting a generation. Mr. Blais talked about the group that they had, which was, I think, teenagers, 15 to 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds. And of course, our audience is really up to 13. So the reason I wanted to talk about the Teletubbies is that they were no longer on the air, and we were, and again, this is, go back to the YouTube theme, we were looking at YouTube, and this is even before we acquired the company that made them. We're looking at YouTube and realizing that 2 things. First of all, that there were tens of millions of views a month, I think with 25 million views a month worldwide of the Teletubbies, first of all, and secondly, that nobody was monetizing them. So Ragdoll, the company created by Anne Wood, who created the Teletubbies and a number of other iconic British shows, was co-owned between Anne and the BBC, and they decided to sell it. We acquired it, but when we were doing the due diligence and the research trying to figure out what that company was worth, a big part of our due diligence was based on the YouTube figures that we looked at to see what the viewership was for things like the Teletubbies and a number of the other shows in the library. And what we realized, 2 things. First of all, that they were more popular than we imagined still with kids and parents. In terms of discoverability, because again, this is the thing, this is the legacy brand, is that parents or grandparents were directing their kids to this kind of content on YouTube. And the other thing is that we use that as evidence for broadcasters to say, this is still popular, and if you broadcasters are having a hard time with brand new shows getting people to tune in and watch, we're going to make a great version of a well-known brand already, and you will have an easier time in terms of your ratings wars and so on. We also then actively started to manage the Teletubbies content on YouTube to the point now we're, I think, up to 90 million views a month. So it represents a big chunk of the viewership that we have. And by the way, with YouTube, we know where people are watching. We know what device they're on. We know which territory they're in, what city, and we know how long they watch. We generally don't know who they are, though, but we've got a pretty good idea. Yes. So that's the Teletubbies. Any questions on the Teletubbies?
How do you monetize that?
Well, YouTube serves commercials against it, and that, I mean, this is AVOD. So for us on YouTube, it's AVOD. The new episodes are not on YouTube. Only the old episodes are, and then some clips and games and some other little bits and pieces. So the new episodes are traditional monetization through broadcast sales, and then there's some other toy deals and a whole long list of other consumer product deals for that one. Doug?
Sorry, you said you got into this arena because you found that your shows were being put on YouTube by users.
Yes.
So in effect, there wasn't any kind of scheduling brain behind it, and now you said we're moving to a more managed universe. What does that mean when you say manage, and what proportion of the revenue you get comes from the managed side as opposed to the user-generated?
Yeah, it's an interesting area, and the statistics change every week. When we've set up official channels for many of the titles that we own, and what we've seen is as the user-generated content, and there's lots of user-generated content that truly is piracy. As pirates have been discouraged, what we've seen is the user-generated drop and the official channel rise, quite simply.
How do you leverage the YouTube viewership in your marketing campaign to bring people to the new show?
So that we do territory by territory. We have to do that in a partnership with broadcasters, and broadcasters in different territories have different attitudes towards that as a positive or a negative thing. But what we do have is we have basically short teaser content of the brand new Teletubbies on YouTube. So it's very limited. What we're really trying to do is make sure that we're encouraging the viewers to go to our broadcast partners. Sure.
Just a quick question. Do you think that the YouTube videos reduce your ability to make linear sales of this library content, or is your logic that you sort of made all the money you can from these broadcast sales?
So far, it hasn't. I mean, again, that's such an evolving area, and as I say, broadcasters in different territories have different attitudes towards it. So this will be on Nickelodeon Junior in the U.S. One of the things that they insisted on was that they limit the number of episodes we have on our official channel. So each territory is different that way, depending on who the broadcast partner is. Gigi.
Just going back to Degrassi, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Did you discuss with Netflix, or did you think about like doing another version for them without the next-ons or whatever they considered a spoiler alert? Like, what was that discussion like, or did they just take the content that you created and said?
Well, they bought it before we made it, and they
Didn't do two versions.
no.
You didn't think about doing like one without a next-on. I don't know what they would consider a spoiler alert in the binging world. We had developed a new series Right.
in anticipation of our U.S. partner continuing. when they passed, we just took the new version to Netflix, and then did some new development for them around that. And that's all kind of separate from the spoiler alert stuff. I mean, the spoiler alert stuff is all on social media, right? I mean,
So they were just worried about that people were talking and you didn't worry about like what was in your next on or what was in your previously on or anything like that. That's not part of the equation.
not really.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah. And then,
Can I ask another quickie?
yes.
The traditional role of a Canadian broadcaster, say, with a series that it's ordered pre-production, is that they would have executives assigned to the show, look at every script, give notes, and so on. And I know that from Stephen and Linda that the tone of the Degrassi series changed fairly considerably with the new series that went to Netflix. What role does Netflix play? Does it play a role that's, in terms of content and creative supervision, do they play a role that's like the Canadian broadcasters used to, or did, or do?
Well, I think, again, that's one of the really interesting things for those of us who've grown up selling content to broadcasters is, no, they do not play quite the same role. In fact, they're hugely creator-friendly. I think it's one of the things that they promote about themselves. And they do have opinions, and they do have executives assigned, but it is very, very different from working with a traditional broadcaster. And initially, most of those companies or platforms had more people analyzing data than they did analyzing scripts. And then I just thought I'd put Inspector Gadget up here, another show that has real heritage and legacy. It was initially produced as a Canada-France co-production. 1983, Michael Hirsch was one of the executive producers. And we relaunched Inspector Gadget a couple of years ago, and it's done very, very well around the world. And so I think that one of the things here is that, for me, it's Degrassi started in '79. This show started in '83. Teletubbies in '91. So if you look at this, there are parents who grew up watching Inspector Gadget who were actually, I mean, the numbers again from YouTube, when we're looking at this, the numbers for Inspector Gadget were huge. And we believe that it was, of course, parents sitting down with their kids saying, you want to see a really great show. Now, of course, you look at them and you say, wow, it was never that slow when I was a kid. That's a different subject. That's my next slide there. Okay, so I'm going to move from the legacy brands to the new. And I think that for us, as broadcasters, we spend a huge amount of time trying to figure out what we think is going to work as far as new shows. And certainly there have been creators who've said, well, if you're only focused on recycling old ideas, what about some of my new great ideas? And of course, we continue to believe that fresh new programming is one of the things that drives ratings and viewership and so on. And I guess that comes back to the kind of core of discoverability, is how do you get people to notice those new shows? I've got a few shows here that are family channel shows that have had some kind of an international profile. So the first one, The Next Step, which is produced by Temple Street, created by Frank Van Keeken. And there's a number of things about this show, and actually the Shaw Rocket Fund is instrumental both in terms of its initial creation, and they've been a key funder of it from day one. And that should probably stop any questions from them on it. Maybe not. Anyway, The Next Step launched on Family Channel. When the Family Channel actually had Disney programming, again, this is one of the other themes, is that in terms of discoverability, there's nothing like putting a new show next to a currently performing show in order to get people to pay attention. It's an old strategy. It's worked. It continues to work. And so The Next Step, first of all, it's a great show. It is a little bit different from the comedies that Disney was making. It was carefully scheduled and programmed right from the very beginning at Family Channel. But this is, again, I would say it's a sort of a scripted faux reality dance show. Does that sound right, Agnes? Yeah. It's proved to be hugely popular. And so for us, one of the things about this was then, let's figure out how, where else and what else we can do with this. So Temple Street's done a good job of getting this placed internationally. It happens to be a huge hit in the UK on the BBC. We partnered with Temple Street to create a live show. So this is completely outside of the social media and digital world. But the other thing, and again, I think from the CMF discoverability essay that came out last week, one of the things they talk about is marketing. And they talk about kind of stunt events, and I would expand that to include live events. One of the things that has happened with the next step is we've got a live tour that started in Canada. It started out relatively small. It grew to the point where last year it actually did 60,000 admissions across Canada. So basically a live touring show in theaters, targeted really at viewers and kids under 13 years old, 14 years old. That was successful enough, and the show has been enough of a rating success in the UK and Spain that we expanded the live tour there this year. And we had sold out shows in both of those places. But the interesting thing for us on this is that, and again, I suppose it's another one of the themes, is you have to be, even if the key platform is traditional television, you have to be across every other platform that there is, and the live events platform has proven to be a really great adjunct to the promotion of this series.
I have a question. So when you
Sure.
sell it to a broadcaster internationally, worldwide, and they buy the rights to it, and you're monetizing it on an SVOD or an AVOD or YouTube maybe, do you hold back the window so the broadcaster has a chance to monetize it first, or how's that relationship work, or is it negotiated at the time?
This is an evolving area of our business, and it used to be that for some of the SVOD services, they didn't mind, or even the traditional broadcasters, they didn't mind. And even the early days of Netflix, we could make a traditional over-the-air broadcast sale as well as a Netflix sale in a territory, and they didn't mind. It reminded us actually of window sharing with cable, when cable first, when the proliferation of specialty channels came out. But that's actually evolved now, where they want exclusive windows, and and on both sides. The good news is that's actually driven the price up. So for people selling content, there are better license fees because of that. People pay for exclusivity. The next show I'm going to talk about, so this is a show called Hank Zipser, which is a huge hit in the UK. It's a show that we produce with a company called Kindle in the UK and distribute worldwide. We put it on the Family Channel before we got rid of the Disney content. And we had it programmed around some of the Disney comedies, and it performed very, very well. Then when we stopped airing the Disney content, for some reason, the ratings on this show did a bit of a dip. Now they're coming back up now, but we were trying, again, this is part of the theme. How do you get kids to discover shows? So this is a very English show. The kids wear uniforms, they have accents, and of course we've tried to figure out why does this show, which does very well in other territories, have this kind of lumpy time in Canada, and everybody has a different theory. There's no real science around it, but the real reason I want to show is because it was created, written by a guy who's actually well-known, dyslexic, and the main character, Hank, is dyslexic, but very verbal, and the creator of it is none other than Henry Winkler. Now, you'd think Henry Winkler would be promotable, but it turns out kids have no sense of nostalgia. Who knew? Unless they were watching Arrested Development, which probably not a good idea. So anyway, these are books, as I said, written by Henry, huge passion project, and he'll go anywhere and everywhere to promote the show. And that has worked, I'd say, very well in the UK. We haven't done a lot of promotion with Henry here, but one way or another, we also think it's an audience where that doesn't really matter. What matters is whether the show is funny and whether they like the kids and so on. So again, hits and misses. This one's a little bit of a miss. The next show I want to talk about is a gaming show in my parents' garage. So our creative executives, Michael Goldsmith in particular, at the Family Channel, observed that we kept, well, what he said is, you know, we've had websites, we thought we had to have websites to engage kids, and for a time that was true. Every channel had a website, every channel had a bunch of different content they'd put on the website, games, other activities, bios, lineups, character descriptions, and so on. And what we could see is that the traffic was falling off. So one of the thoughts was, well, kids are, where are they going? They're looking at games, they're playing games. Let's make games and put them on our website. But of course, it didn't take us too long to figure out that we can't that we're never going to do games that are good enough to compete with where kids are going for the game experience. So Michael had a really simple but I think smart idea. Why don't we make a show about gaming? And and he pitched the idea or discussed it with a great little company called Banger Media, based here in Toronto, who we'd worked with before. And they came back with an idea that was, let's create a fake YouTube show where 3 kids literally review games in their parents' garage. Thus the title, Gaming Show in My Parents' Garage. So, and so we cast these kids, we made a pilot. The pilot was just okay. We showed it to Disney. They said, this is terrible. We would never have anything like this on our network. Pass, pass, pass. And then we put this on YouTube. And now, again, to come back to my theme about how we're using the different parts of the universe and different platforms. So we put this on YouTube, and we had our YouTube group put little tags at the end of some of our most popular episodes that or shows that we thought would appeal to the target audience for this. And it basically, it's a little recommendation engine. It says, if you like this, or Johnny Test, go watch this. Well, we had, within 8 or 9 weeks of putting this on YouTube, 2 million views of this pilot. Now, just raise your hand if you ever heard of a Canadian pilot ever getting 2 million views ever. No, I thought so. I thought Doug was raising his hand. We knew that there was something that connected with kids, and actually we'd actually gone ahead, ordered the show, made the show, and it was about I think six weeks into the YouTube campaign that the show went on the air.
Who did it go on the air?
Family Channel, our channel, and Charged. And it has been one of our #1 rated shows ever since, and we move it around to the different channels. It's got lots of extra content, it's fun, it's not that expensive, and it really fits with, I mean, this is the thing about, think about where kids are. Go where they are, make content that is similar and looks like what they're choosing to watch. It seems kind of obvious when you state it that way. Oh, and by the way, Disney bought it. And time for a video interlude. I'm going to show you the opening title sequence to this. From YouTube, of course.
Hey guys, and welcome to Gaming Show My Parents' Garage's YouTube channel. Gaming Show.
Sorry for the ghetto tech.
In my parents' garage. I'm Jesse.
I'm Julia.
And I'm Ian. Come check us out to see what we're all about. I mean, we got Let's Plays, the newest, coolest games ever.
We like collaborating with a lot of big YouTubers. There's a lot of Minecraft.
All the Minecraft.
So
Kind of
much
obsessed.
Minecraft. We get to see what different gaming companies are up to.
Can you get some donuts for us?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yes, that was awesome. That's exactly how you look in a game.
This is happening in Illinois. That's what they tell me.
Maybe a bit more slow. You're Charles Martinet, right? You're the voice of Mario.
It's me, Mario.
So, what's the development of Ratchet and Clank Blade?
That's my coffee.
By the way, it's still warm.
I'm not gonna lie, sometimes things around here get pretty weird.
Pretty awkward.
Escucho pato!
Jesse, you're kind of a weird dude.
I get that a lot.
Are you here to interview us about guacamole?
See. Watch the game, feel the beat.
I'm feeling it.
You're not racing this car. In fact, you can't even look at this car. Don't look at it.
I'm looking.
Stop.
Okay.
You look
kinda
like the
do.
kid who plays the young mate.
That means so much.
What video game do you think I'm from?
I'm gonna go with Pong.
Why do you get that sword? It's on
'Cause I'm
fire.
awesome.
Oh,
I'm mayor. Would it kill you to blog a shop?
What'd you say about me, Ian?
The first driving games that was in color.
That's great, but I'm kind of trying to focus right now.
it's the end of the line, Lego man. Stick around and check us out.
And we'll see you guys soon.
See ya.
Cut our production costs in half. But the other thing that we're doing is taking, again, legacy brands, and you wouldn't know this one, but Brum was a television show from the early 90s, created by Anne Wood, the same woman that created Teletubbies, very well known in the UK. And what the group did there is they looked and said, okay, we've got this old brand, the shows aren't that great, nobody really wants to watch them, they get some viewership, But then one of the other things that they realize is there's a trend, now you know about toy unboxing videos. Do you know about car wash videos? Okay, so apparently kids love to watch car wash videos. And so there are millions of views, literally, of cars going through a car wash. Okay, you learned something here today. Huh? I could be you. Get it up there and monetize it. So one of the things our crew did is take Brum and do some animation of Brum, and it's the Brum car wash video. And it, within a few weeks, has millions of views. I have the video. I'm not risking another one. Oh, thank you. Are you ready? That's good. That's a Brum's car wash adventure. It's not long.
Is it just the one?
That was it.
Okay. Oh.
Can you go back and do that?
Hey, here in my backyard.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll just kill that and we'll move on to the next slide. We're there anyway. You can shut that one down. Anyway, you get a bit of the idea of the animation. Very simple animation, but so for us that's using a bunch of different things. An old brand, a trend on YouTube right now, new content, and immediately with millions of views. Okay, so it is true, we don't just make kids content. I thought I would talk about Letterkenny. If you're not familiar with Letterkenny, it is an outrageous comedy, think Trailer Park Boys in a small Ontario town. I thought this would be, so first of all, our comedy business is another kind of small subset. A few years ago, we invested some money in another incubation project, a small company called Reimagining Media, run by Mark Montefiore and Patrick O'Sullivan. And they were focusing on some new comedy ideas. And Jared Kiso, is from Listowel, Ontario, and he and a friend created a Twitter account that was called List Problems, that were about the problems of their small town. It's all very funny. And they realized in a town of 5,000 people, they had 1,500 subscribers pretty quickly. So they took a camera and they went and shot a few episodes and put them on YouTube. And in a very short time, it had hundreds of thousands of views. And it's very funny, it's very dry. And for people who've ever spent any time in the Ontario countryside, it's highly recognizable. So relevant to a lot of people. So Mark partnered with Jared, created a television show around it, and then went out pitching. In the meantime, the YouTube views started to increase dramatically. And they had a significant amount of interest, but Bell was interested even before they'd started Crave TV. But this turned out to be the first Crave TV original. And we understand that the show has done very well for Bell. It continues to get a huge number of views on YouTube. It is definitely not for children. Go watch it in the safety of your own home. And Bell has just ordered another season of it. But the reason I wanted to talk about this is, of course, comedy is the other thing that is that knows no bounds when it comes to these new platforms. And I think Bell in particular has done a spectacular job of managing and promoting this. And one of the other things for me is that size really does matter in terms of being able to promote shows both in a particular country, but internationally as well. So Bell basically used all of its resources, all of its different platforms, comedy, CTV, Crave, etc., to promote this radio. They took advantage of the fact that it had a huge number of views on YouTube as well, social media, etc. And so it's apparently the most watched show on Crave TV these days, and certainly a great thing as an original. And I think as much as people are looking at Canadian broadcasters and saying, so what are you going to do to reflect Canada to Canadians, and how do you manage and promote it? This show is a little surprise. And certainly it was a bit of a surprise for us. In fact, some people in our company are really surprised when they see it, because it hasn't exactly been, our kind of our core focus. But the other thing that Bell did, which I think is interesting in terms of talk TV and what consumers seem to want, is they promoted it heavily during the Super Bowl. Now, next year, I'm wondering, will this be promoted in the Super Bowl, or will we just get American commercials? Anyway, we were quite pleased with the way that Bell managed that. And by the way, we've done some analysis on the YouTube numbers, and it has 5 million, the content has 5 million views from the US. There's been no effort yet really to kind of focus on promoting it there. We're talking to traditional broadcasters about buying it. And again, that's one of the tools that it's already popular. And there are a number of, I guess we'd call them opinion leaders, Kevin Smith, and our old friend Hart Hansen, who happens to be Canadian, well-known American showrunner, watching it and tweeting about it, and they both have tens of thousands of followers. So when you start to figure out, how do you build up critical mass of viewership outside your own territory, that was a bit of a surprise and not something we could have necessarily targeted. So we're coming up to the end of my session here in a few minutes. So there's a few things that I just want to come back to on this. And I actually want to just go to the CMF document that was produced last week, which I thought was good, and looking forward to the second part of it. But again, they talk about marketing, and when it comes down to this, the discoverability, a word we didn't really use or didn't know so long ago, and is apparently not really that pronounceable in either official language. So the things from the CMF study is they talk about marketing, and they have a number of categories that they actually identified. Search and optimization. Okay, again, we all know about how that about what that is. How it works technically is a hugely complicated thing, and of course that also goes to algorithms. We've heard a huge amount about algorithms, and if you've read anything about this, you realize how unbelievably complicated those things are becoming. And this is really about predicting what you would like to watch with some element of randomness put in it. Digital ad campaigns. Digital ad campaigns turn out to be hugely important in terms of generating audiences. It is one of the things we were doing, for example, with the gaming show. We're actually buying ads on YouTube. Now, I was interested in buying ads on our content on YouTube because we split the revenue 45-55 with Google, and we get 55 cents back on every dollar. Not to make too fine a point on it. Grassroots campaigns, they mention that in their list. Targeting communities of interest. Then they talk about traditional marketing, prints and ads. And I think there's a big question about what the effectiveness of that is, and how you measure it. Some of these other things you can actually measure with a much greater degree of precision. And then finally, the one thing that they didn't mention, but which in our space is hugely important, is how you relate to YouTube stars, and how those people who have become stars on YouTube are migrated into other kinds of media. So as far as, just to kind of wrap this up, and then if there's any other questions, I'm happy to continue. I think my conclusion is that whatever you're doing in terms of getting people to discover things, you have to work across and pretend to understand all platforms. Well, I'm kind of serious because I think there's lots of people, including marketing professionals, who talk about those things without really knowing how some of it works. And this is really all about the newness of this world. And all you have to do is talk to a 15-year-old and find out what they're doing on social media to be surprised. And if for those of you just getting on Facebook, there's a bulletin. It's not really where kids are anymore. And then I think the last thing, and I've said it before, but I really do think that that vertically integrated companies, and I don't mean it necessarily in the CRTC definition of VI, but I mean companies that are able to work across multiple platforms. I mean, we're a vertically integrated company working across every possible kid platform and opportunity. I think that vertical integration really does matter in terms of being able to get audiences to find new programming. And that's all I have to say. Sure.
I have a quick question for you. So with all of these platforms like YouTube and Netflix being international, do you ever run into issues with, like, for tax credit or funding purposes needing to have a Canadian presence that kind of interferes with what these international companies want to do in Canada?
So far we have not, but there has been, I think, robust discussion around having, let's say, non-traditional platforms trigger tax credits, and I guess that's CMPA is certainly is pushing for that, and I think it'll continue to be an interesting issue.
But so in that instance, would the family channel then become like less of a priority, would you say, for the company?
Well, and again, maybe I haven't stressed that, but we think that traditional broadcasting will continue to be hugely important. And even though kids are watching on other platforms and devices, there's still massive viewership of traditional broadcast platforms, and it remains the most popular destination and the one that generates the most money to put into new content. Sure.
Apart from YouTube, how have programming, be it adult programming, teen programming, or the kids, how have they incorporated second screen viewing?
Kids?
Any of the shows that you discussed, how have they incorporated second screen viewing?
Well, I guess the research that we've seen says that that kids are watching multiple devices, and so I think Degrassi's actually been one of the leaders in terms of second screen programming. So while you're watching Degrassi, you can, there's a whole other world you can follow that's Degrassi related. We've done that, a little bit of that on some of the other shows, but again, some of this is really age related. So if we're targeting really 9 to 14-year-olds, that's hugely important. It's much less important for the younger viewers. Yes?
Hi there. My company, one of the things we do, we're a radio station, but we also run a YouTube channel that has around 15,000 subscribers, just under 3 million views. Been going for about 2 years. We got about 300 videos. Something you said for the gaming show was that you added some tags on the end with regards to a recommendation, and you kind of like went through that pretty quick. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit on how that works?
That would be the part about pretending to know how all these things work. No, so first of all, it's easy to do on our own channels, and it's a little harder to do on all the UGC stuff, but you sound like you have your own channel.
Yeah.
So for us, and again, I don't know how technically they were doing it, but basically they created, was like our own little banner that just went on the end of, and it happened that Johnny Test popped up there. So it's really just a little banner that we stick on the end of our own show.
Videos.
Yeah, exactly. That's all it is. Yes.
I just see some English programmation, or maybe Inspector Gadget be co-produced with France, maybe is in French. Do you accept some series, French series?
Absolutely, we do, and in fact we have a preschool channel, Reimagining in Quebec as well. Yes, absolutely. $2.39.
I do have one. Just on this point that the gentleman made, if a third party puts programming on one of your channels that is now mixed with your programming, and the sole source of revenue on the YouTube channel is the split, how do you split then between the third party provider and you, since that you're now kind of collating that channel?
So there are many channels, and but when it comes right down to it, you can tell exactly how many views and what revenue any particular title is generating, and that's part of the thing about our megadata base and the YouTube interface. And actually, it's quite fascinating to have a look at. And for us, it's searchable. Can have a look any day at how many views you've had, and in fact, even with YouTube, you can check in on how many views and what kind of revenue your title has generated. That's all become very user-friendly. Be interested to see what Amazon does, and from what I can see, the music publishing business is actually going the same way.